Authorities received an anonymous tip, information from someone who claimed to have overheard disturbing details about what had happened on the night of the party. According to court documents, this individual contacted law enforcement to share their concerns, and those concerns led investigators right back to the mobile home. The source implied something chilling. The truth about Alyssa's disappearance had never truly left that house. Whatever had happened to her was still there, hidden somewhere within those four walls. On February 8th, 2018, 5 days after Alyssa was last seen, law enforcement secured a search warrant and returned to the residence. What they uncovered inside would forever change the course of the investigation. There, within the confines of the mobile home, they found Alyssa. It was a devastating discovery. Just days earlier, she had left home brimming with energy and plans, eager to spend time with friends. Now she had become the center of a tragedy, her life cut short, her story ending far sooner than anyone could have imagined. Dear viewers, we appreciate your support and comments. It means a lot to us. Thank you for being with us. Alyssa Noseda was born on August 25, 1999, in Everett, Washington, a modest working-class city located roughly 25 miles north of Seattle. Surrounded by the misty beauty of the Pacific Northwest, Everett was a place defined by hardworking families, tight-knit communities, and a mix of suburban life with access to both the sea and the city. For Alyssa, this was home. It was where she took her first steps, spoke her first words, and began shaping the strong, determined character she would later become known for. As the firstborn daughter to her mother, Gina Noseda, Alyssa quickly took on a role of responsibility and leadership in the family. She was a protective older sister to her younger sibling, who was only 7 years old in 2018. According to Gina, Alyssa had always been an energetic and social child. She was outgoing and talkative, someone who found it easy to make connections. Whether in school or in her neighborhood, Alyssa's personality stood out. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and full of determination. A girl who smiled easily and carried herself with confidence. She attended Mariner High School, a large public high school in Everett recognized for its diverse student population and spirited community. Alyssa's early years there were marked by enthusiasm and involvement, but like many teenagers navigating their way through life, her path wasn't always straight. Sometime around 2016 or 2017, Alyssa decided to take a temporary break from school. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but rather one shaped by personal challenges and the desire to recalibrate. Instead of spending her time idly during that break, Alyssa decided to do something meaningful. She got a job. She began working at a pizza restaurant on Whidbey Island, a picturesque and peaceful location across the waters of Puget Sound. Getting there wasn't easy. Every workday required her to take a ferry from the Mukilteo terminal, followed by additional travel to reach her job. Depending on the time of day and the ferry schedule, the commute could take well over an hour in each direction. But Alyssa never complained. The job may have been physically demanding and the hours long, but she embraced the challenge. Her position at the pizza place became more than just a source of income. It became a symbol of her growing independence. Gina remembered how proud Alyssa was to be earning her own money, managing her responsibilities, and getting a taste of adult life. It was during this time that Alyssa began thinking more deeply about her future. She wasn't content just coasting through life. She had ambitions, and even though she had temporarily stepped away from high school, she hadn't given up on her education. Alyssa's bond with her family, especially her younger sister, remained strong. She wanted to be a role model, someone her little sister could look up to. Her mother described her as someone who truly understood what it meant to work hard and bounce back. By early 2018, Alyssa had started organizing the paperwork needed to re-enroll at Mariner High School. Her plan was to graduate with her peers, walk across the stage with friends, and celebrate that achievement with the people who meant the most to her. For Alyssa, returning to school wasn't just an obligation. It was a goal she genuinely wanted to accomplish. Outside of work and her academic plans, Alyssa lived the life of a typical 18-year-old. She enjoyed simple pleasures, spending time with friends, listening to music, going out for food, or just relaxing at home. She was social and outgoing, but also grounded. She liked being in Everett, where she was familiar with the rhythm of the city and knew the spots where young people hung out. Cozy coffee shops, local parks, and the occasional small party at a friend's place. She wasn't reckless, but she did enjoy having fun. Alyssa knew how to balance responsibility with freedom. On the evening of February 3rd, 2018, Alyssa kissed her mom goodbye before heading out the door. It was a Saturday night, and she had plans to attend a party. Not a wild or raucous event, but the kind of casual get-together that was typical for her age group. Before leaving, Alyssa packed a small bag with an extra set of clothes. That simple gesture suggested she planned to stay over at the party location or a friend's place afterward. This wasn't unusual for her. It was something she'd done before. Her mom, Gina, trusted her. Alyssa was the kind of daughter who stayed in touch, checked in when she was out, and generally made responsible choices. She told her mother that the party was being held at a mobile home in the 400 block of Lakeview Road near Martha Lake, an area located just a short drive from their home. It was a neighborhood she knew. She had friends there. It wasn't unfamiliar territory. As she left, she called out to her family, saying she loved them. At the time, it seemed like a regular goodbye, just something she often said without much thought. But for Gina, that memory would later take on a deeper, more emotional significance. Martha Lake, located in Linwood, is a quiet suburban pocket nestled about 15 miles north of Seattle. The area is known for its peaceful atmosphere, local families, and clusters of mobile homes and apartment complexes. The mobile home park where the party took place was not unlike many others in the area. Compact, with homes close together, and frequented by local teens and young adults. It was a known hangout spot, a place where people gathered on weekends to unwind, laugh, and catch up on each other's lives. Alyssa wasn't walking into unfamiliar territory that night. She had been to gatherings like this before, and she recognized several of the people who would be there. It was the sort of place where a circle of friends might meet to decompress after a long week. Her expectations were simple and ordinary. A few hours of music drifting from a speaker in the corner, easy laughter from familiar voices, light-hearted conversations, maybe a couple of drinks, and the relief of stepping away from the grind of classes, part-time work, and the thousand small stresses that cling to young adulthood. For someone her age, this was a weekend ritual, an unremarkable slice of small-town life, the kind of night that promised nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, nothing more than a pause from responsibility before Monday came knocking again. The picture of what happened that evening comes almost entirely from court records, official police accounts, and the memories of those who were there. Witnesses later testified that Alyssa did indeed arrive at the mobile home just as planned, greeted by a mix of nods, hugs, and casual hellos. Inside, the mood was understated, not the raucous chaos of a television drama. Conversations happened in small clusters. Some people sprawled comfortably on worn couches, others perched on bar stools in the kitchen, cups in hand. It wasn't a wild scene. No blaring chaos, no shouting over the music. It was simply a weekend gathering of acquaintances, classmates, and friends who had crossed paths enough times to share easy company. Alyssa slipped seamlessly into the flow of the night. She was known for her warm, approachable energy, quick with a smile, naturally good at drawing others into a conversation without making it feel forced. She laughed easily, listening as much as she spoke, and people seemed to lean toward her in conversation without even realizing it. There was no tension in her demeanor, no nervous edge, nothing to hint at any trouble ahead. But as the hours passed and night turned into early morning, something shifted. According to official court documents and witness reports, Alyssa spent part of the evening in one of the bedrooms inside the mobile home on Lakeview Road. She was seen socializing there with others who had come to the party, laughing, chatting, and participating in the usual energy of a weekend gathering among young people. The bedroom, in the early stages of the investigation, appeared to be just another space where teens and young adults hung out. However, it would later become a critical focal point in the search for answers. At this point in time, little was known about what exactly occurred in that room. Friends recalled Alyssa being present, part of the crowd, sharing in the conversation and the mood of the night. There was nothing especially alarming to onlookers. She didn't appear distressed or out of place. But as the night progressed into the early hours of the morning, something shifted. Somewhere along the timeline of the party, something went wrong. Subtle at first, it would soon become a devastating turning point. The following morning, February 4th, 2018, came quietly. But the silence that followed Alyssa's last known interactions quickly grew louder. She wasn't answering her phone. No calls, no messages, not even a casual text to check in. For someone like Alyssa, who was known to keep her mother updated, especially after a night out, this was deeply unusual. Her phone, normally a lifeline of constant communication, had gone silent. Gina Nocita, Alyssa's mother, would later reveal in interviews that she had an uneasy feeling from the moment Alyssa left the house the night before. Something hadn't sat right with her. A quiet, internal alarm that she had brushed off at the time. Gina had trusted Alyssa, trusted her instincts, her maturity, and her judgment. But now, that trust was becoming clouded by worry. Still, she tried to remain calm, hoping that maybe Alyssa had just stayed the night with a friend and had overslept. Or maybe her phone had died. It was easy to explain away for a few hours. But as February 4th faded into the next day, that hope began to dissolve. By February 5th, 2018, Gina had still heard absolutely nothing from her daughter. No replies, no word, not even a seen notification. The last known contact anyone had with Alyssa was around 8 p.m. on the night of the party, February 3rd, and now it had been nearly 2 full days of silence. Gina knew her daughter. Alyssa wasn't someone who disappeared without explanation. She wasn't the type to go completely off the radar. For her to go this long without checking in, especially knowing her younger sister was at home wondering where she was, meant something was seriously wrong. Gina's concern turned to fear, and then to a quiet panic. That same day, Gina turned to social media as a last resort. On February 5th, she posted a heartfelt and urgent message to Facebook. "I haven't seen or heard from my daughter since Saturday night. If anyone knows anything, please contact me." The post wasn't just a status update. It was a cry for help. It was the voice of a mother grappling with uncertainty, trying to turn digital networks into a lifeline. Friends, family, and even strangers began sharing the post. The message traveled quickly across local timelines, reaching anyone who might have seen or heard from Alyssa. The online world was now involved in what had become a very real and growing mystery. What had happened that night? Why wasn't Alyssa responding? Had she simply decided to spend the night elsewhere and lost track of time? Or was there something more troubling behind her sudden disappearance? Back at home, her younger sister, too young to fully grasp the weight of the situation, was also left wondering. Friends who had seen Alyssa at the party were equally confused. A few of them had vague memories of seeing her late into the evening, but none could say with confidence when she left or if she ever did. Some assumed she had slipped out quietly or caught a ride with someone else. But no one had definitive answers. The night had grown hazy in memory, and timelines were blurred. Gina, still clinging to hope, began asking questions, reaching out to anyone who had been at the party. Some friends offered to help, informally questioning others who had attended, but no one could offer a concrete recollection of Alyssa's last moments at the mobile home. The absence of clear information was agonizing. Realizing that time was critical and answers were not forthcoming, Gina contacted the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. What began as a personal search now transitioned into an official missing persons investigation. Police officers immediately began looking into Alyssa's last known whereabouts, zeroing in on the mobile home on Lakeview Road, the last place she had been seen. Investigators started by speaking to people who had been at the party. The goal was to establish a reliable timeline, to map Alyssa's movements throughout the evening. But early efforts were challenging. Witness statements were inconsistent. Some offered vague answers. Others didn't remember much. The accounts conflicted with each other in small but frustrating ways. No one could confidently confirm if Alyssa had left the house, who she had been with last, or if anything unusual had occurred. Then, the case took a significant turn. Authorities received a tip, an anonymous lead from someone who had heard unsettling details about the night of the party. According to court records, this individual contacted police with concerns that pointed back to the mobile home. The tip suggested that the truth behind Alyssa's disappearance had not left that house. It was still inside, somewhere within those four walls. On February 8, 2018, 5 days after Alyssa had last been seen, law enforcement officials obtained a warrant and returned to the residence. This time, they weren't there to ask questions. They were there to search. What they found during that visit shifted the entire trajectory of the case. Inside the mobile home, Alyssa was discovered. The finding was heartbreaking. A young woman full of life, who had left her home just days earlier to spend time with friends, was now the center of a tragedy. The energy of a typical Saturday night had turned into a permanent silence. What had once been a place of music and conversation was now a scene of sorrow and investigation. In the days that followed, law enforcement began treating the location not just as the site of a disappearance, but as an active investigation into what had happened to Alyssa. Detectives worked methodically, documenting every detail, collecting evidence from the room where Alyssa had been found, and seeking clarity about the hours leading up to that moment. According to court documents, investigators gathered a range of physical evidence, carefully cataloging everything that might help tell the story of what happened that night. Each item collected was a potential clue. Each detail mattered. The process was slow and painstaking, but necessary. Meanwhile, the Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office was brought in to determine the cause and manner of Alyssa's death. Their findings would become a crucial part of the puzzle. Weeks later, on April 17, 2018, the medical examiner publicly released their official report, providing the first medical insight into the case. By then, the community was already in mourning. Friends, family, and countless others who had followed Gina's desperate posts online now had their answer, one that no one had wanted, but everyone feared. The official report released by the Snohomish County Medical Examiner ultimately ruled Alyssa Nocita's death as accidental, citing the cause as an overdose. While the report did not explicitly indicate that there was any direct foul play involved in the overdose itself, it left behind a cloud of uncertainty and heartbreak. It raised difficult and deeply troubling questions. Questions not just about the substances involved, but about the actions, or inactions, of the people who were present during Alyssa's final hours. According to the official evidence gathered, the timeline that unfolded was tragic, devastating, and possibly preventable. Alyssa had arrived at the party full of life. She had been socializing with others, and by all accounts, was simply enjoying herself in a bedroom at the residence, laughing, talking, being part of the group. Then, something changed. At some point not long after entering the room, Alyssa began showing signs of distress. Court documents would later reveal that her collapse happened quickly, within a matter of minutes. What followed, or more accurately, what failed to follow, became the core focus of the investigation. It didn't take long for law enforcement to narrow in on an individual whose behavior after Alyssa's collapse raised serious concerns. Investigators believed that someone at the party had far more information than they initially disclosed. In particular, their attention turned to one person, a person whose decisions that night would become the center of a case that shocked an entire community. For Alyssa's family, the news that she had passed away was incomprehensible. Gina Nocita, who had spent sleepless nights desperately searching for her daughter, found herself thrust into a nightmare. In interviews with the Everett Herald, she spoke through tears about her daughter, describing Alyssa as a vibrant, strong-willed, and inspiring young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. Her niece, Rella Palmer, echoed those sentiments. She described the entire family as being in disbelief, struggling to process how what was supposed to be a normal night out had taken such a catastrophic turn. At just 7 years old, Alyssa's younger sister was left without the guiding, protective presence of her big sister. a loss that would leave a permanent mark on her childhood. Gina was consumed by a mix of emotions: deep sorrow, overwhelming grief, and a rising tide of anger. As she spoke to reporters, one question repeated itself in her mind: what really happened in that mobile home? And why didn't anyone help her daughter? The pain of not having been there for Alyssa in her most vulnerable moment was only intensified by the knowledge that others were. Yet no one had stepped up when it mattered most. Gina shared more about Alyssa's upbringing, and in doing so, revealed a powerful generational connection. She had given birth to Alyssa at the age of 18. Like her daughter, Gina had also attended Mariner High School but faced her own struggles. "She kind of saw what I went through," Gina explained. "I got kicked out of Mariner and ended up in an alternative school. I had a lot going on and eventually dropped out." Alyssa had watched all of that, and Gina believed it gave her daughter both strength and a cautionary blueprint. Something to learn from, something to do better than. "I think she tried to use that as an excuse to understand me," Gina said, reflecting on how their journeys, though different, were deeply intertwined. As detectives dug deeper into the hours after Alyssa's collapse, they began to uncover a disturbing timeline. One where crucial decisions were not made, and where intervention might have made all the difference. Court records referenced multiple missed opportunities to seek help. Witnesses described conversations that took place, moments when it would have been possible to call for emergency assistance. But instead, those chances slipped away. On February 8, 2018, 5 days after Alyssa's disappearance, detectives from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office arrested 19-year-old Brian Varela at the same mobile home where the party had taken place. The arrest followed a tip from one of Varela's co-workers, who had heard him speak casually about the incident in the days following the party. This co-worker, who would later be credited with helping bring the truth to light, made the difficult decision to come forward after seeing Gina's emotional plea on Facebook. According to detailed reports obtained from court documents, Alyssa collapsed in Varela's bedroom during the February 3rd party. Eyewitness accounts and digital evidence indicated that her condition had changed dramatically in just a matter of minutes. Rather than contacting 911 or seeking any form of emergency help, Varela reportedly took photographs of Alyssa in a vulnerable state and sent them to his friends, accompanied by a text that downplayed the situation, saying, "It seems she's had too much to drink." Instead of following the urgent advice he later found online regarding overdose protocols, Varela chose not to act. He performed internet searches about what to do in case of an overdose, but ultimately ignored the most critical instruction: get help immediately. By the following morning, February 4th, Alyssa had tragically passed away. Varela allegedly showed Alyssa's condition to his roommate, who strongly urged him to contact authorities. Still, Varela refused. Instead of taking action, he went to work a double shift at Dairy Queen. There, he reportedly spoke about the incident in a nonchalant manner, even bragging to a co-worker. According to what was recorded in court documents, Varela admitted that he wasn't entirely sure whether Alyssa had been alive during parts of the encounter. It was also revealed that Varela had used Alyssa's fingerprint to unlock her phone. He posted a misleading message on her Snapchat account stating, "I'm out. Bye," in what authorities believe was an attempt to create the illusion that she had run away. Additionally, investigators learned that he had made efforts to erase digital traces and potential DNA evidence, and had even discussed plans to dispose of items in a wooded area near Marysville. He mentioned to friends his intent to leave the country, reportedly talking about fleeing to Mexico. Thanks to the co-worker's courage in speaking out, investigators were able to act quickly. On February 8th, deputies searched the residence and confirmed what they had feared. Alyssa was found inside the mobile home, and Varela was taken into custody. The case moved swiftly into the judicial system, where prosecutors filed formal charges. On February 9th, 2018, Varela was officially charged with first-degree manslaughter in Snohomish County Superior Court. Bail was set at $500,000. Despite the severity of the allegations, the case faced significant legal challenges. According to state law in Washington at the time, failing to seek help for an overdose victim was not necessarily prosecutable unless the victim was elderly, pregnant, or a child. This legal gap made proving manslaughter difficult, despite the overwhelming moral outrage. Still, the evidence was strong, and public interest in the case was growing. On September 20th, 2018, after months of legal negotiation, Brian Varela entered a guilty plea as part of a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter, accepting a reduced charge that reflected negligence and failure to act, rather than premeditated harm. The plea deal sparked debate, but for Alyssa's family, it at least marked a step toward justice. Deputy Prosecutor Tony Montgomery explained to the Everett Herald that the plea agreement, though difficult for many to accept, was a calculated legal decision. It wasn't about minimizing the tragedy or ignoring the pain of Alyssa's family, he said, but about ensuring a conviction that would hold up in court. The reality was sobering. Washington's legal framework at the time left room for ambiguity in cases like this. Taking the case to trial risked an acquittal, or at the very least, a reduction of charges due to technical limitations in how the law treated cases of neglect that led to an overdose in a young adult. In the face of those legal constraints, the prosecution opted for certainty, even if it came at a cost emotionally. The sentencing hearing on November 15, 2018, was somber and emotionally charged. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Family members, friends, and community supporters sat shoulder to shoulder, many of them wearing black sweatshirts with the words, "Justice for Alyssa," printed boldly across the front. Some hoodies bore an image of Alyssa smiling, radiant framed by delicate angel wings. The symbolism was clear. For those who knew and loved Alyssa, she had been more than just a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a girl with dreams, gone far too soon. Alyssa's mother, Gina Nocita, addressed the court through tears. Her voice, though trembling, carried power and conviction. She called the plea deal a slap on the wrist, a punishment far too lenient for what had been taken from her. She didn't just grieve. She challenged the very system that allowed her daughter's life to be reduced to months behind bars for the person involved. She described Varela's actions that night as not only careless, but heartless, emphasizing how difficult it was to comprehend how someone could witness another person in distress and do nothing. Another voice that spoke up that day belonged to Catherine Kossel, a friend of Alyssa's. She drew attention to something that had deeply disturbed many people familiar with the case: the fact that other young men had also received the photos of Alyssa in distress. According to court records and statements, some of them even made cruel and inappropriate jokes in response. Catherine's voice was steady but filled with frustration. "They cracked sickening jokes too," she said, "but they aren't facing any punishment for failing to call for help." Her words hit hard, shining a light on a larger issue: that inaction can be just as damaging as action when lives are at stake. On the other side of the courtroom, Varela's defense attorney made a plea for leniency. He pointed out that Varela had no previous criminal record. He had admitted guilt, entered a plea, and, according to his defense team, had shown remorse. When Varela himself was allowed to speak, his statement was brief. He didn't offer any detailed explanation or long-winded apology. Instead, as recorded in the official transcript, he said, "I'm sorry for my foolish actions. Whatever I get is what I deserve." The courtroom remained silent after his words, some hearing a flicker of regret, others seeing them as far too little, too late. Deputy Prosecutor Montgomery, however, pushed for the maximum allowable sentence. He made it clear to the court that Varela's choices that night were not simply foolish. They were callous, dangerous, and showed a stunning level of disregard for another human being's life. The prosecutor emphasized that it wasn't just the overdose itself that led to tragedy, but the failure to act, the hours of delay, the texts sent instead of calls for help, and the deception that followed. When it was time for Superior Court Judge Linda Sessi to deliver her final remarks, she did not hide her frustration with the limitations imposed on her by the sentencing guidelines. Looking directly at Varela, she said, "You described your behavior as foolish. I think that's a gross understatement. It's deeply concerning, and I certainly understand why the victim's family and friends feel surprised, even outraged, by the sentence that must be imposed here." She went on to note how, under Washington state law, Someone with no prior criminal history, no matter how serious the offense, could not receive more than 34 months in prison for second-degree manslaughter in this type of case. Judge Cece noted that, paradoxically, in some jurisdictions, individuals charged with auto theft or property damage could face longer sentences than what was available in this case involving the loss of a life. With visible reluctance and solemnity, Judge Cece sentenced Brian Varela to 34 months in prison, the maximum allowed under the law for the charges he faced. That translated to 2 years and 10 months, with potential reductions for good behavior, as allowed by state statute. For Alyssa's loved ones, the sentencing may have marked the end of the courtroom proceedings, but it did not bring closure. Outside the courthouse, Gina Nocita spoke to members of the media. Holding a photograph of her daughter, she voiced what many had been thinking. "It's a joke," she said bitterly. "Usually, people who do stuff like this don't get away with just a slap on the wrist. We were told the law's hands were tied, but how can that be right? How can someone do so little to help and then walk away in just a couple of years?" The sentiment echoed throughout the community. Many Everett and Linwood residents, including teachers, neighbors, and friends of Alyssa's, took to social media to express their disappointment in the system. Posts were filled with grief, anger, and support for Gina's family. Rallies and local gatherings were held in Alyssa's memory, each one emphasizing the importance of intervention, responsibility, and compassion. In the weeks that followed, Gina Nocita vowed not to let her daughter's death be forgotten, or reduced to a cautionary tale buried in a legal archive. She began speaking out publicly, not only about Alyssa's case, but about the need for legal reform. She expressed interest in seeking a retrial or legislative changes that would hold people accountable for failing to act during medical emergencies, especially when it involves vulnerable or incapacitated individuals. Her mission was fueled by more than grief. It was fueled by purpose. Gina wanted to ensure that no other mother would have to stand in front of a judge and hear that the law had done all it could, even when that didn't feel like enough. She hoped to push for clearer laws around duty to assist, advocating for stronger protections for overdose victims and harsher consequences for those who walk away. Alyssa Nocita was remembered not only as a young woman who once worked late nights at a pizza shop on Whidbey Island, but as someone with dreams, resilience, and a life full of potential. Her story is a tragic reminder of how a single night, a seemingly ordinary gathering, can take a devastating turn. It also stands as a call to action, for communities to look out for one another, for bystanders to become upstanders,